Sup, bro? Sup, bro? So did you smash last night? Nah, man, she wasn't into it.
This is a casual conversation that you can hear within a high school hallway on a regular basis.
These comments have no purpose or reason but are still considered socially acceptable.
In John Green's Looking for Alaska, there is a scene that is less graphic and more meaningful, but is considered more pornographic than these daily comments.
The sex scene in Looking for Alaska is to show the contrast between an emotional bond and a physical bond between two humans.
So what's the difference? Are these comments just as pornographic, or are they considered normal because of how adaptive we become to them?
The realism in this book is shown through Pudge's perspective on losing people and connecting with others.
Where in the idea of growing as a person is there porn?
If parents can allow their kids to talk about sex, then what's the harm in letting them learn that you don't need to have a physical connection in order to love another person?
These same parents that are so against having their kids reading Looking for Alaska are still letting their kids read a book like Romeo and Juliet.
Romeo and Juliet contains a lot of sexual innuendos that promote the idea of sex more than what that awkward sex scene ever did.
'Tis true, and therefore women, being the weaker vessels, are ever thrust to the wall. This quote was taken directly from the glorified novel Romeo and Juliet, and you know what infuriates me most, Jane?
What?
That Romeo and Juliet is more sexual than Looking for Alaska, but it's considered a classic, and Looking for Alaska is considered pornographic.
True. So where do we draw the line between pornographic and a classic book?
Who gets to decide what we learn and what we think is worthy to be a classic?
Stooks, I understand that some people aren't comfortable with the content that's in Looking for Alaska, but I think it's absurd that Looking for Alaska is considered pornographic and Romeo and Juliet is considered a classic when Romeo and Juliet contains way more sexual comments and content than Looking for Alaska.
Looking for Alaska contains one awkward sexual scene, and the rest of the book contains realistic and influential life decisions.
People are focusing on one small part of the book, but overall, it's a good book and should be taught in the classroom.
But our classroom isn't the world. The world is so much bigger than what it is to us now. It's not this class or this school or even the town that we're living in. The world is greater and it's bigger and it contains so much more, and everyone in that world is living their own labyrinth, and that labyrinth won't end until they end.
The labyrinth in Looking for Alaska represents how in life when you can't forgive, you have to forget.
And that's exactly what Pudge did. He couldn't forgive Alaska for leaving him, so he knew that he'd have to forget. That he came to terms with his memories of her slowly slipping away as he got older. He became acceptant that you can't stop the unstoppable, that his labyrinth was meant to go on without her.
The people who think this book is pornographic are the people who aren't looking at it bigger picture.
They probably haven't even read the book.
John Green wrote this book to be a positive influence on teens.
He didn't write Looking for Alaska so teenagers could think about sex.
John Green wrote this book for kids to think about their great perhaps in their future.
And that's why Looking for Alaska should be taught in our classroom.